Patience. You've got to have patience. It's not necessary to take every client that comes your way. There are such things as bad fits. As a small business owner and operator, it needs to be a good fit on both sides. Too often you see people forcing square pegs into round holes. It just leads to pain, discomfort, and bad reviews now online. Don't do it. Don't take it just for the sake of taking it, would be my advice.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Frank Barrett. Frank in high school enlisted as a junior into the Army Guard. And then went on to take advantage of the GI Bill and took some classes in IT. Afterwards, started working for a company in IT, was lured away to another business, so with the offer of more money. And then after 5 months, figured out that made a mistake in joining them, decided to leave and go elsewhere, and so left and joined a small consulting practice that did that for about 6 years. Then went to work for a larger company in IT again. Missed seeing his kids and decided to go out on his own, which is leads him to where he's at today. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Frank.
Thanks, great to be here.
Absolutely. So I just took a much longer journey and condensed it to the 30-second version of it. So why don't we rewind and unpack it a little bit and tell us a little bit about how your journey got started going to high school and enlisting in the Army Guard.
Yeah, so 17, usual angst 17-year-old guys had, I guess, and was approached by a recruiter, said, "You ever thought about enlisting?" I said, "Yep." Probably the easiest recruitment he'd ever had. A little bit of silence, tested, joined, came home, graduated high school, and a friend of mine said, "Hey, I'm going to take some night classes. What are you doing? You want to hang out?" I said, "Sure." "What are you doing?" He goes, "I think I'm going to do IT." Ryan is now a history teacher, and 23 years later, I'm still in IT.
So now we can jump over those whole 23 years and to where you're at today. So you were in high school, said, okay, Army Guard's a great opportunity, provides some pathways forward, and you can do that. So how long did you stay in the Army Guard for? Because I know you later on you took advantage of the GI Bill, but kind of how did that start out or start out for you?
I was in the Guard for 6 years. I was infantry. Doesn't move to IT well, but it allows me to handle pressure fairly well in the IT space, not being shot at. Went to work for Uncle Sam after I got out of the Guard on the civilian side for the courts for a decade, bankruptcy court in Nebraska. Great time, but wanted more. Government's a great job, set hours, but I just needed more for my career. So went to work for a small consulting firm and was there for 6 years.
Now, just one question just to fill in a little bit of the gap. So, because I know you mentioned you took advantage of the GI Bill, took some IT classes before you went out into the working world, so to speak. How did you, or what prompted you, or what made you gravitate towards IT, and kind of how did you get set on that path after being in the Guard?
It always came fairly easy. We had some computer classes in high school. Didn't take advantage of those, but just have a programmer mindset. So the initial couple semesters was around programming. I quickly realized I like to be mobile and not stuck behind a desk. So switched to the networking side and just had a knack for it. like I said, it came natural. It was
Mm.
something I didn't have to force, like accounting classes or marketing classes. Those I had to force. Brutal. But the IT stuff just came easy.
Mm. No, makes perfect sense. And a lot of
Mhm.
times you always you gravitate towards something you or oftentimes have a natural inclination for. So it sounds like you found a good niche for you. So you went and you or did the Army Guard, took advantage of the GI Bill, took some IT classes, and then you said you went out and started working for a company for about 6 years in the IT industry.
Yeah, after my time with the U.S. courts, I went to just a consulting firm, and we had manufacturing. We supported surgery centers, small businesses, accounting firms, and that really was there's a strong desire to help that segment, which is largely overlooked.
Hmm.
Uh, Everybody wants to go do work for the big fish, the whales, if you will, and
Hmm.
forget about the small companies that really drive America. So I'd been there for 6 years and was approached about a leadership position with a small fire truck manufacturer in Snyder, Nebraska. Went
Now,
and
and
met with,
and I think you mentioned, part of it you were approached, you were I think in your own words, lured away with more money and the promise of, even a better option, and you did that, but it was a fairly short-lived opportunity. Is that right?
yeah, 9 months into that, and I wanted to be at the CIO level by 40. That was just a personal goal that I'd set. 9 months into that, the CEO said, "Hey, I need you to sign this paper because we're going to sell this small company to a publicly traded company." Doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize you don't necessarily need two directors of IT or two CIOs or what have you. So I had relegated myself to probably going to move on. It was a great time, but I'll head somewhere else. Wasn't the case, and eventually took over as head of IT for that organization.
Hmm. So
And just
now,
a few
so
months.
short-lived opportunity. And now, how did you figure? And I agree. You look and say, hey, if there's two of us, it would be trying to fit the same role. One of us is going to be redundant, and so that
Mm-hmm.
there means that one of us probably doesn't have a long future there. And so,
Mm-hmm.
how did you figure out where you're going to go next? You just started applying for jobs, or kind of
Well,
what was the path that took you to the next phase?
so their leadership team came out and visited with the leadership from the smaller company,
Mm.
and they interviewed us, and they said, "Hey, we've heard what you've done here. We would love for you to do it for us in Michigan." I said, "That's great, but I'm happy living here in Iowa. I'm going to stay here. No hard feelings." Like, "Well, we really want you now. You don't want to be here. We really want you." It
Mm.
was kind of an office space, real life office space scenario. If you saw the Mike Judge film, um, joined their leadership team within, I think it was 12 months, and taken over the department, and ran the IT team for the larger organization. With that came travel to Michigan every week. Nothing against the mitten, but I'm an Iowan. My kids are in Iowa, and I miss my kids. So I made the decision to exit that role and fire up my own consulting firm to get back to the small business roots
Mm.
and help
No,
that space.
no, makes perfect sense. And maybe one follow-up. I mean, was that kind of a just, an overtime, hey, I'm or just generally involved and too much, away too much or from home, and or kids are missing me, or the wife is telling me, and I didn't even ask if you were married at that time, but, wife was telling me, hey, kids are missing you need to be home more, or was that kind of just a personal epiphany, or kind of, because I think a lot of people, you get into the travel and the allure of, hey, I can see a lot of places, makes me feel important, I get all these benefits and all those things, and yet then at some point a lot of times you realize, hey, all this isn't worth it if all of a sudden don't get to see my family or get to enjoy what I'm trying to work for. So kind of how did that evolve for you?
Yeah, so I started, I was scoutmaster for a Boy Scout troop, which I'd started in 2016. And that being on the road took me away from that. So it felt like I'd not only abandoned two sons, but 18 adoptive sons in addition. Um, was there for most meetings, but my sons grew 5 inches, 7 inches each, so roughly 6 inches apiece in that 18 months I was on the road. And I didn't remember more than an inch of their growth. And so I missed quite a bit. And those hard numbers were enough for me to say, okay, I'm gonna fire up a company on the flight up, which is what I did to Michigan, and I'm gonna give my resignation. I want to say, hey, I'm just done. I'm gonna go home. That's not right. I had to say I was going somewhere and actually mean it. So here's my company. I'm gonna go do this. No hard feelings, family first. And that's important. Like you said, there's an allure to being on the road all the time, seeing new places, and um, you know, for me, family was more important than 400,000 sky miles with Delta or 300,000 points with Holiday Inn hotels, or 2 months of unlimited free rentals from Avis. The family was more important, and should be more important than those numbers. Came home and then took 6 weeks off while I decided where my target was going to be, and then started picking up my first clients.
That's what I was gonna say. So, and did you, as you're trying to say, okay, made the decision, family's more important, gonna stay home, gonna, shift my life around a bit in order to accommodate that or make sure that I'm there and see the growth of my kids as opposed to just seeing a small snippet of it. Now, how did, when you were looking at that, did you just say, hey, the only option, because you could have also just tried to find a job, closer to home, or you could have tried to shift, careers a bit or go into a different area or done a number of things. But what made you decide to take the leap and start your own business?
It was really just to have a clear conscience and not say, hey, I'm going to go do this. I wanted to actually have something tangible. And if I didn't line anything up, then I would, next step, try to find another role. But wanting to be that business owner and back in that space, the drive was enough and strong enough pull that I let a couple friends know, hey, I've left that company. I'm out doing this. If you have needs, let me know. And they both said, surprisingly, we do. So I landed a couple long-term engagements with two former colleagues and current friends, and away we went.
That's awesome. So now the question, or one maybe follow-up question to that is, so you decide, okay, going to make the leap, going to start my own business, going to pursue that. Did it take off like wildfire? You mentioned, maybe getting or having some clients early on. Was it just something that just took off and you were rich beyond your wildest dreams and you wish you'd just done this earlier? Or was it bumps and figuring things out along the road, or, figuring out how to navigate that, or it tanked and you filed bankruptcy a month later, or kind of anything in between? How did it go as you jumped into doing it?
Ideally, it would be sunshine, rainbows, unicorns and ice cream cones or whatever. That's not the case. There are always going to be peaks and valleys when you work for yourself, hopefully more peaks than valleys, but you need to make sure you are smart to weather those kind of low spots. Times might get tight, and that's okay. The worst thing you could do is pull away and go do something safe, in my opinion. Now, things happen. Sometimes you have to. It's okay. But that's everybody's own personal decision. Me, I enjoy this. It's a lot of fun. You get to choose who you work with, which is really nice. The approach then was, hey, my kids are winding down high school, so I want to spend as much time as I can with that. I'm only going to commit to 20 hours a week. I'll make the numbers work, but I'm only going to commit to 20 hours a week.
Hmm.
And that was a good space, comfortable space for us to be. Still enabled me to, keep lights on, food on the table, and buy unnecessary toys. Add to my antique tractor collection.
No, that's awesome. So now with that in mind, you made that transition. Kind of catch us up a bit to how it's progressed and where it's at today is and kind of and where maybe a little bit of where things are headed. Kind of get or catch us up a little bit on the business.
So present day, I joined with two other individuals who had a traditional data center company. That's not a space that I played in. I was more on the long-term strategy planning, managed services side. So we joined forces last August, and now it's ArcLight Solutions is the company where we build out, tear down, decommission, consolidate data centers in addition to project work, long-term planning and strategy, and managed services, managed security services that I bring to the table. So it extends the amount of offerings we have, expands them greatly, which is nice and allows us to remain competitive.
No, that's awesome. Sounds like continue to find a great track and expand the business and otherwise grow. So that's awesome. So. Well, now as we've kind of caught up to the present day of your journey and even looking a bit into the future, great time to jump to the two questions I always ask at the end of each or towards the end of each episode. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what'd you learn from it?
Try to live with no regrets. So this was a tough question to answer. Early in my career, I started a side business, and the idea was I'm going to get this to where I'm working 50% of the time after hours on my own time, that I would bring in 50% of what I get paid by my day job. And that's the trigger to flip the switch and then do it full time. If I can do it, make half what I make at night part time, then I should be able to do the rest during the day. Closing that business was painful but necessary. Shutting that down, and I say that because young family, 2 kids under the age of 2, insurance had doubled at that point. So the safe decision was to stay where I was at. My sons were more than worth it. So that's not to say that I regret shutting it down, but that was a tough business decision to make, to walk away from when I was right on the cusp of hitting that 50% mark. So played it safe. I kind of wish I'd kept that one going, but I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So like the bad tattoo says, no regrets,
No, I like it. And I think it's always that hard decision. And, a lot of times if you're entrepreneurial minded or, you enjoy it and you thrive at it, or you're starting to just, put in a lot of time and effort into it and you're starting to see success, then you're saying, what is the decision, or it's, that much harder to walk away from it or that much harder to shift gears. So definitely get where you can look back and kind of say the what if or that. But it also sounds like, learn the lesson of just because it may be a good business path doesn't mean it's the right one for you or that it's the right one for your family. So definitely makes sense. So second question now that I ask is, now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you give them?
Patience. You've got to have patience. It's not necessary to take every client that comes your way. there are such things as bad fits. As a small business owner and operator, it needs to be a good fit on both sides. Too often you see people forcing square pegs into round holes. It just leads to pain, discomfort, and bad reviews now online. Don't do it. Don't take it just for the sake of taking it, would be my advice.
No, and I think that's absolutely a great piece of, and you hit on a couple. One, I think overall, just general patience is something that you need as a small business owner, startup. And, you see all the, whether it's on, movies or TV or the LinkedIn posts or Instagram or Facebook, whatever. And it just feels like everybody is an overnight success. And, hey, I made 8 figures in 2 weeks and those type of things. And, you get that false sense of, what isn't really reality, and yet it feels like it because that's what you see. And yet I think there's a lot more patience involved. But even more on that is, as you hit on, is kind of that patience needs to also be, sometimes it can, if you're impatient, it can lead to taking on bad clients or people that, and not even always bad clients, maybe they're just not a right fit, or they don't fit with what you're trying to offer, or it's not a good a good option for them. And yet sometimes as a business you're impatient, or you're wanting to get going, or you get a little bit desperate and you take those on, and it can have a negative impact on the business even more so. So I think that there are some great takeaways and great pieces of advice. Now, as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
You can find us at ArcLight Solutions, ARCLIGHT Solutions.net. You can find me on LinkedIn, Frank Barrett. The only one with this face, probably for better. Or reach out, Frank at ArcLightSolutions.net. Happy to take care of you.
Awesome. Well, definitely a lot of great ways to connect, support a great business, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again, Frank, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, and leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Thank you again, Frank, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.